Number two, really looking at the Southern Poverty Law Center as the arbiter of who is a hate groups or terrorist organizations is ludicrous. They themselves have listed people like Dr. Ben Carson, the United States Border Patrol, as hate organizations, and the Family Research Council is another one. So they have very little credibility in this regard.
Welcome back to New Day, everyone. President-elect Donald Trump says he will dissolve his charitable foundation to avoid any suggestion of a conflict of interest, but it's not clear what further steps that he's going to take to separate himself from his business empire. CNN's Ryan Nobles live in Washington with more. Good morning to you.
Don, good morning, and we're still waiting to learn how Donald Trump will separate himself from his global business empire, and the details on that aren't expected until after the new year. But dissolving his charity is another step by the president-elect to remove his personal life from his presidency. And in a statement, Trump wrote, quote, "To avoid even the appearance of any conflict with my role as president, I've decided to continue to pursue my strong interest in philanthropy in other ways." Now, logistically, it shouldn't take much to shut the charity down. It currently has no employees and hasn't raised funds in some time. But legally, it is a different story. A spokesperson for New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, who was a Hillary Clinton supporter and launched an investigation into the charity during the campaign, said the foundation cannot dissolve itself until his investigation is complete. Schneiderman has been investigating how Trump used the foundation to settle personal business dealings. Now, this news comes at the same time, I should say, of a staff shakeup for Trump's incoming administration. His White House communications director, Jason Miller, has said that he is not going to take that job because it would be too demanding for his young family. Poppy?
Ryan Nobles, thank you so much for that. Let's discuss all of it and more with Congressman Scott Perry of Pennsylvania. He is a conservative Republican. He's a member of the House Freedom Caucus. Merry Christmas, sir. Thanks for being with us.
Merry Christmas and happy Hanukkah. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. I'd like to get your take on what Ryan was just reporting. The president-elect coming out this weekend saying he will dissolve his charitable foundation. A bit of a roadblock to that is the current investigation. But, I mean, that brings up the bigger, broader, frankly, more important question, and that is, what is he going to do with all of these business ties, all of the ways that he's interconnected with these global businesses, and he takes office in 25 days. Does it concern you at all, despite being a supporter of his during the campaign? Does it concern you that he has come out and said, okay, I'm going to get rid of the charitable foundation, but nothing else has been clarified, and he postponed the press conference where he was going to explain all of it?
I think this is probably fairly intricate stuff at the president-elect Trump level. Every single federal elected official goes through this as standard fare, that they have to dissolve and distance themselves from previous or current allegiances from a business standpoint so that there is no conflict of interest. Like I said, it's standard fare. It might be more complicated in his case just because of the scope and the level of his dealings, but I'm sure there are literally teams of lawyers working to make sure that he is in compliance with not only the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law.
It's just that he hasn't come out and said that he necessarily would extricate himself fully. He hasn't said that indeed he'll use a blind trust. He hasn't said indeed that he'll have someone else completely overseeing this. He hasn't made indications or said publicly that the Americans shouldn't be concerned because he will do that. In fact, he's noted the law, the sort of odd part of the law that exempts the president and the vice president from having any financial stake while they are running the country.
Once again, I think that he's leaving it in the lawyer's hands. I'm not an attorney, but I suspect answering prematurely might be problematic for anybody at that level, and you want to make sure you get it right. So with all due respect, he's probably waiting for them to come up with all the answers so that it can be comprehensive and correct.
Okay. And we have a lot I want to get to, but he did say throughout the election that he thought he was going to win. Therefore, he could have had his attorneys working on this for months and months and months ahead of time so that when he takes office in 25 days, there would be no questions to the American people. But I want to move on because Don just made some news in his interview with the Israeli ambassador, Ron Dermer. I'm not sure if you heard it. Good, you heard it. So you heard him say to Don, essentially at the beginning of the interview, that Israel has evidence that there was essentially collusion between the United States and the United Nations that proves that they were pushing this when it comes to the resolution on Israeli settlements, and they were basically colluding behind the backs of Israel. Don asked for the evidence. He said, we have evidence, but they're not going to present it, they said, until president-elect is in office, and then it will be up to the Trump administration whether they want to present it to the American people. There is a sitting U.S. president. Do you agree with them on that?
Well, there's a sitting U.S. president that worked against a sitting Israeli prime minister in his last election. So with all due respect, I think that Ambassador Dermer rightly understands that this administration is really not friendly to Israel, is not going to give them a fair shake, and is not going to be above board. So what is really the point of bringing the information forward now, only to be squashed and quashed and put to the back room and the back pages of history by this current administration? I think they're looking for, and rightly so, a more favorable venue in a president-elect Trump administration. So I think it's appropriate.
So the fact that the Obama administration has signed the largest MOU ever to any other country, $38 billion over the past 10 years, or the fact that this is the first time in 8 years that this administration has supported or has abstained, rather, and has allowed a resolution critical of Israel to pass the UN Security Council. The first time, whereas with both former President George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush, it happened multiple times. You still believe that this administration is no friend of Israel and should not even have evidence of alleged collusion?
Well, first of all, when you say it has passed multiple administrations without a veto, it hasn't passed. This is the first time it has passed. I mean, it makes the Western Wall an illegal place for Jewish people to be and to pray. They can't even legally go to Hebrew University if you look at the strict construction of the resolution. So when you say it's the first time that the United States hasn't vetoed it. It's the first time this thing is passed. And so I think it's very different. Along with the foreign aid, let's remember what that was in response to. That's in response to the Iranian nuclear deal, which really puts Israel at peril. So it's cost all Americans what seems to be a proclivity of one person and an ideology that he himself alone almost holds, and then asks the rest of the government to support. While most Americans probably do support reducing or quitting settlements in what's called the occupied territory, they would also probably be in favor of stopping stipends by the Palestinian Authority to terrorists that murder Jews and get paid to do it, or their families are paid to do it. They just need the information to have the full picture. Understand that since 2000, Israel has offered to stop settlements and has offered to come to the table and essentially give the territory back to the Palestinian Authority. But the Palestinian Authority has not been interested in even negotiating or coming to the table. Those facts need to be known as well.
Congressman, I have one more question for you before you go, and that is a meeting that you had that you're taking some heat for, a controversial meeting. You had a meeting with a group called Act for America. This is a group that the Southern Poverty Law Center calls the largest grassroots anti-Muslim group in America. The Anti-Defamation League calls it anti-Muslim. The woman who you met with, Bridget Gabriel, the founder, said this in 2007 about Muslims in America. Practicing Muslims who believe the word of the Quran to be the word of Allah, who goes to mosque and prays every Friday, who prays 5 times a day, this practicing Muslim who believes in the teachings of the Quran cannot be a loyal citizen to the United States. Your response to those who criticize this meeting?
My response is that as a representative of Congress, I meet with people from all different groups, from all different ideologies, from different religions, and so on and so forth, whether I agree with them or not. I'm a representative, number one. I just don't meet with terrorist organizations. Number two, really looking at the Southern Poverty Law Center as the arbiter of who is a hate groups or terrorist organizations is ludicrous. They themselves have listed people like Dr. Ben Carson, the United States Border Patrol as hate organizations, and the Family Research Council is another one. So they have very little credibility in this regard.
So to that point, you say you meet with all. To that point, you say you meet with all of your constituents, all Americans. Have you met with any American Muslim groups in Pennsylvania?
Sure, absolutely, on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, the Turkish Federation, the local chapter in the district I represent, we have a long-standing friendship and meet on a regular basis and attend events together. So, as once again, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which doesn't know the story, which only offers one side of a story, is completely out of bounds on this.
Congressman, we're out of time. We'll have you back. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it.
A massive winter storm could wreak havoc for millions of Americans heading home for the holidays or from the holidays back to work, right?